Look at yourself for a moment. Not the version you show to the world. Not the curated profile, not the rehearsed laugh, not the list of accomplishments you drop in conversation. Look at the private steadiness of your breath, the little habits you deny have meaning, the secret routines you cling to when the lights go down. Look at the small, persistent voice that says, "Don't rock the boat," and then watch what happens when you obey it again. This voice, soft, reasonable, patient, has made your life tolerable. It has taught you how to survive. It has protected you from embarrassment, from risk, from the destabilizing idea that you might be wrong about everything you built your identity around. But it has also done something else. It has become a subtle jailer. It has turned your fears into furniture. If you feel exposed by that sentence, you're in the right room. Because what I want to do with you in the next half hour, or however long it takes you to read this, is not to give you a pep talk. I won't repackage optimism as instruction or stage-manage bravery for you. I want instead to sit with you inside the discomfort you already know, to name it, to understand it, to pull at the seams until something awkward and true shows through. And then, perhaps, to offer a path that is less about pleasing the world and more about answering the question, who are you, when nobody is watching? We start in the cave. Plato gave us an image, prisoners chained inside a cave, watching flickering shadows on a wall and mistaking those shadows for reality. Step outside the cave, he says, and you see the world itself, blinding, disorienting, real. Most people prefer the cave. The light hurts. The responsibilities of knowledge are heavy. Better to go back, to the comfortable illusion. But Plato missed something important that we now live with every day: the cave is not out there only. We carry a cave inside us. We build it from praise and punishment, from the soft bricks of habit and repetition, from the hard mortar of fear, fear of shame, fear of loss, fear of being uninteresting. Our inner cave is filled with shadows of what we could be. We talk a lot about breaking free. But the truth is subtler: sometimes we do not want freedom. Freedom is cold. Freedom is too big. It asks for decisions we are not ready to make. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the theologian who refused the comfortable acquiescence of his time, wrote about cheap grace, the kind of easy forgiveness that lets you keep living as you always have and still call yourself righteous. Cheap grace comforts us with the idea that we need not change, that our safety is compatible with our integrity. Bonhoeffer refused it. He demanded a costly grace, one that demands real change, real discomfort, and real risk. You already know the cheap thing. It is the promise whispered by your social media feeds, a life that looks meaningful but is not. It is the career you keep because it keeps you safe. It is the relationship you tolerate because loneliness seems worse. It is the ethics of convenience, the morality of the refrigerator light: you only reach towards what is immediate, familiar, and easy to explain. But there is another conversation happening under the surface of your daily life, an argument between two impulses. One says, adapt, fit in, maintain. The other says, grow, test, be true. Which impulse wins depends not on a single heroic decision but on the tiny, repeated permissions you give yourself every day. Nietzsche showed us the violence of our inner world when he asked us to imagine living the same life over and over again, the thought experiment of the eternal recurrence. If this life must repeat forever, what would you choose to do? It's a harsh lens. It breaks the illusion that we can defer our meaning. If the same choices echo eternally, small compromises become catastrophic. The quiet betrayals are the ones that will loop like an intolerable song. But Nietzsche was not only a philosopher of doom, he was a therapist of sorts, calling us to become who we are, a dangerous, clarifying command. Become what you are requires courage. It requires naming the parts of yourself you hide from. It requires a willingness to risk being unloved by a tribe that never loved the real you in the first place. There is a human cost to this hiding. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance, the mind's painful war when our actions do not match our beliefs. To ease this pain, we change what we call truth. We rationalize, we invent narratives that make our choices feel inevitable. It's not that we are liars, often we are excellent self-preservers. Our identities are stitched together with those rationalizations because they keep us functional. But every stitch is a compromise with truth. Let me tell you a story. The city where I grew up had an old clock tower that no longer chimed. Kids would place their ears against the cool stones at midnight to hear ghosts of ticks that weren't there. There was one boy, called him Elias, who told a small lie to everyone he knew. He would go to the university each day and study, but in truth he took the bus to a factory and worked double shifts to send money home. The lie wasn't malicious. It was born of shame and pride, of not wanting to be seen as a failure. Years passed. The university envelope remained unopened on his shelf. His friends moved away. He married a woman who wanted security, not crescendos. Elias never told her. He figured she would understand if she knew, but each small omission made him a stranger to himself. One day Elias left the factory early and went back to the university. He walked into the room with the unopened envelope, placed it on the professor's desk, and told the truth, that he had been lying about his attendance, that he had been working, and that he was sorry. The professor looked at him for a long time, then said, "You could have told me. You would still have been allowed to study." The shock Elias felt was not because the professor was angry, it was because the weight he had carried was the fear of being rejected for his truth. He had not been rejected. He had rejected himself first, again and again. That is the slow violence of small lies and cowardly comforts. They do not explode. They calcify. They make us sleepwalk through lives that look like ours from the outside but from the inside are museum exhibits, pretty, labeled, dead. Machiavelli was not a romantic. He looked at power and described how men and systems survive. He taught rulers to court appearances because people are more swayed by what they see than what is real. In that sense, we are all mini Machiavellis, tending to our little kingdoms of image, maintaining policies of self-representation that ensure we remain useful and safe in other people's narratives. We polish the surface because the inside is messy. But here is an uncomfortable truth: your polish is not neutral. When you spend a lifetime making yourself agreeable, you train yourself to avoid dissonance, to silence inconvenient truths before they speak. The world rewards compliance with advancement and smiles, it often punishes candor with social friction. So the rational choice seems clear: adapt, succeed, survive. Yet adaptation becomes addiction. Comfort becomes the scaffolding of smallness. For all its bleakness, this calculus is not without redeeming alternatives. Psychology offers a relief, the realization that fear is a signal, not a verdict. The amygdala will scream when it senses threat, it will do so whenever you step toward an unpracticed version of yourself. That alarm is ancient biology, it is not a wise guardian of meaning. It protects the body, not the soul. So how do you break patterns that were the face of prudence? The answer is not explosive heroism. It is ritualized courage. It is the daily, deliberate practice of choosing discomfort in the service of truth. Bonhoeffer's costly grace is not a singular sacrifice, it is the small, repeated allowances you give yourself to be honest in situations where lying is easiest. Begin with small convergences between your interior and your exterior. Say the things you usually swallow. Cancel the appointment you keep out of obligation that empties you. Open the email you've postponed because the response could be awkward. Tell a friend the opinion you've been hiding. These acts are not dramatic. They are consistent. Each one is like cracking open a window in that internal cave. Air moves in. Light changes shape. And then you will notice something peculiar: vulnerability attracts, even when it risks rejection. When you begin to align what you feel with what you show, the people around you recalibrate. Not everyone. Some people will not like it. Some will leave. That is a cost. But the absence of those people may be precisely what unchains you. When you perform the truth, you also test the substance of your relationships. Some were designed to support masks, and they cannot handle the contours of your real face. Here's an unexpected twist: sometimes the person most harmed by your staying small is not society, not your boss, but the person you love the most, yourself. Self-betrayal is a theft so quiet that even the thief forgets the robbery. When you habitually deny what you want, you train your desires into ghosts. That absence hardens into despair and sometimes into a dull contempt you never fully see because it hides behind practicalities. Imagine you are an artist who never paints because the canvas is expensive and the neighbors would find you impractical. Imagine you are a parent who never tells their child the whole truth because they fear ruinous practicality. Imagine you are a lover who never says, "I am leaving," because it might unsettle the partner who depends on your reliability. Each of these is a cautious kindness, each hides a violence. There is kindness in protecting others, but protection can become suffocating control. The paradox is bleak: to be kind sometimes requires letting things fall apart so that new structures can grow. Philosophy offers more than critique, it offers practices. Plato suggested ascent, education as the turning of the soul toward light. Nietzsche offered the thought experiment of self-overcoming, the practice of testing one's limits and making art out of the self. Bonhoeffer demanded action, costly, communal ethics that refused the anesthetizing comforts of easy righteousness. In psychology, exposure therapy shows that repeated, controlled exposure to what terrifies us reduces the fear response. The lesson across disciplines is similar: step into the discomfort, gradually and consistently. There is another uncomfortable truth here: you can be morally correct and still be cowardly. The measure of courage is not always the nobility of your opinions but the willingness to risk them in the world. Consider someone who believes in justice but speaks about it only in private. Their belief, however righteous, is functionally inert. Courage is the bridge between conviction and action. It is the muscle that must be exercised. Let me tell you about a woman named Layla, who worked at a hospital where she noticed an administrative pattern that endangered patients. She raised it first in whispers, then in memos, then in meeting rooms. Each time, the institution softened the concern with polite language and bureaucratic delay. Layla could have walked away, she had excellent offers elsewhere. Instead, she stayed and escalated. Her persistence lost her friends in the administration, cost her a promotion, and turned meetings into cold rooms where she felt isolated. But she forced change in ways only her specific form of courage could. She created a public record that could not be easily erased. The institution improved. Some people thanked her, others called her trouble. She still had to pay personal costs. Courage rarely spares us those. But the scale of good she produced was not measured in accolades, it was measured in lives safer because she refused to tidy her conscience into secrecy. This is not a heroic romance. Most necessary courage is dull and bureaucratic. It is showing up and refusing to consent to small injustices. It is apologizing when you are wrong, even when it makes you look small. It is speaking your truth to people who will not applaud you. It is doing the thing you most resist because your pattern of avoidance has made that thing into a specter. And here is a sharper twist: some parts of you are not meant to be fixed in a conventional sense. There are deep attachments, traumas, and histories that require more than affirmation to change. Sometimes courage includes the humility to accept that certain wounds will never fully heal and to choose life anyway. The narrative of radical transformation can sometimes be toxic. It tells us that a single decision will remake everything. Real life, and real courage, mostly look like stubborn patience. The world will not reward you for every truthful act. It will reward consistent competence, sometimes moral integrity, sometimes nothing at all. So why take the risk? Because living untruthfully has a cost that compounds. It becomes the subtle erosion of joy. It makes joy brittle, a laugh that sounds like a practiced beat, a smile that is more a social currency than an expression. Truth-bearing is not a guarantee of bliss. It is the keeping of your soul's accounting, honest and unmanipulated. We are surrounded by illusions of freedom, flexible jobs that are actually more precarious, endless self-help that is really just optimized comfort, philosophies of personal empowerment that collapse into market strategies. The modern promise that you can be anything often translates into a quiet compulsion to perform a version of freedom that is still anchored by market and social anxieties. Authentic freedom, the kind Plato hinted at and Bonhoeffer demanded, costs. It makes you reckon. Here's another way to think about it: imagine the self as a garden. Fear and habit plant invasive species: convenience, complacency, people-pleasing. You can buy cosmetic landscaping, quick mulch, bright but synthetic flowers that cheer your feed and stop real inquiry. Or you can weed, slowly, methodically, until you start to see the soil again, until new, native things can take root. The process is dirty and slow. It is not photogenic. It is the opposite of virality. Yet the harvest is real. So what are the first weeds you should pull? Start honest. What are you doing out of fear? What have you convinced yourself is noble but is actually comfortable cowardice? Take one relationship, one project, one recurring behavior. Trace its origin. Ask yourself, did I do this to protect someone else, or to protect my image? Did I accept this compromise because it aligned with my deepest values, or because it kept me small and safe? These are brutal questions, and you will want to answer them with excuses. Do it anyway. You will meet resistance, internal and external. Your inner voice will narrate danger. Friends will prefer the person you were because they love that version. Changing you changes their world. That is not necessarily malicious. It is just human. When you start being honest, you will destabilize many things. Some things should be destabilized. Some will be broken in ways that are painful but necessary. And there is a kindness in radical honesty: it frees other people. When you stop performing, you give those around you permission to stop performing. Vulnerability is contagious, in a good sense. It makes possible better conversations. It allows kinder forms of truth. You will see people shift, relax their defenses, speak their fears, and new forms of intimacy will arise. You not only claim your own life back, you create space for others to do the same. A final uncomfortable truth to hold: not every act of daring will be meaningful. You can quit a job and go unfulfilled. You can confess a love and be rejected. Courage can fail, or at least not bring the tidy, heroic payoff you imagined. But failure is a teacher that cowardice cannot access. When you succeed, the world rewards you. When you fail, you learn. The greater sin is not to fail, it is never to have tried. So let's bring all of this into a practical map, not to regiment your life into righteous steps, but to give you concrete ways to start dismantling the small tyrannies that live inside you. Keep a truth journal. Each night, write one thing you said that wasn't fully true and one thing you left unsaid. Don't punish yourself. Just observe. Over time you will see patterns, recurring deceptions, habitual silences. Practice micro-exposure. Choose one small discomfort each week: a conversation, a risk, an honest apology. Do it deliberately. Note the body's reaction, the heart racing, the aversions. Keep going until the reaction dulls. Make public commitments to small acts. The more you anchor your small acts of courage in social reality, the harder it becomes to retreat into old comforts. Public vows are not just for spectacle, they create a record and a gentle accountability. Find a community that rewards truth. This is harder than it sounds. Many communities celebrate conformity. Seek those rare people who prize honesty even when it is awkward. They exist in unlikely places, in small professional groups, in therapy circles, in quiet friendships. Learn to sit with grief. Sometimes the cost of truth is loneliness or loss. Let yourself feel it fully. Grief is not failure, it is often the cost of realignment. It clears space. Celebrate small acts. Courage is like muscle. It grows with repeated use. Acknowledge yourself. Not because you deserve applause, but because recognition helps neurobiology accept new patterns. You will probably do all of this imperfectly. You will relapse. You will buy a new mask because it feels easier some mornings. That is fine. Part of being human is not being a flawless moral agent. The point is not perfection, the point is fidelity to the inner claim you cannot properly silence. The most radical act you can do in a life that pushes you towards comfort is to be uncomfortably honest, with yourself and with your small world. That honesty looks like silence in some rooms, uproar in others. It looks like choosing to remain when leaving would be easier, and it looks like leaving when staying would be fashionable. It looks like admitting that you don't yet know, and letting the not knowing be fertile ground rather than a defect to be resolved instantly. I want to end with an image. Think of your life as a room in a house you inherit. For years, the floorboards creak in certain ways. You have stuffed boxes under the bed, old expectations, rituals, muted arguments. In the corner sits a mirror fogged by breath. One day you pull the boxes out and let the room breathe. You stand in front of the mirror and wipe it clean slowly, and what looks back is not a brand new you, not a fully reimagined ego. It is someone with lines and scars, with a posture learned in the light and the dark. You might like them. You might not. But they are yours. That is the first step. The second is to live as if the person in the mirror matters more than the comfort of the furniture you inherited. Let the people who loved your furniture adjust. Let the people who loved your real face stay. Be prepared for the rest to leave. And remember, if you are brave enough to let the small tyrannies fall away, you will cross a threshold into a life that is not safer but truer. If you carry one thought with you today, let it be this: the cost of preserving comfort is the slow theft of your life. The cost of speaking truth is often loss, of friends, of prestige, of convenience. But loss paid for the sake of truth buys you back the one thing worth having, an interior that is no longer at war with itself. When the night comes and the clock tower's chiming is only in your memory, ask yourself, if this life returned tomorrow in exactly the same form, would you accept it? If the answer is a trembling yes, if you would choose these loves, these compromises, these silences, then go on. If it is a hesitant maybe, or a no muffled under excuses, then know you possess the medicine for the doubt, a slow, stubborn courage that chooses discomfort, one day at a time, until the shadows no longer seem like the only reality. Be gentle with yourself. Be fierce with the parts that demand comfort when your soul asks for truth. In the end, the thing you most owe to the people who love you is not your convenience. It is your honesty.